Welcome to the podcast where together, every Monday, we explore hospitality in its very broadest sense. From culture and cooking, cocktails and coffee, nutrition and farming, politics and animal welfare, organic and sustainability, family and business, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. Come and learn with me, Mark Cribb, about where our food and our drink comes from, and the businesses and, more importantly, the human beings that thrive on where we decide to spend our time and our money. Sign up to our weekly newsletter at humansofhospitality.co.uk and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. By the time Tim Maddams had reached the end of his first year as a professional chef, working in a restaurant kitchen, he came to a crazy realisation. He had cooked more meals in those 12 months than most people prepare in an entire lifetime. And for a while, working hard with luminaries like Alastair and Pierre White, and even appearing on television with Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, gave Tim a constant buzz. But after one family holiday, he realised that if he continued on that 70-hour-a-week path, he would find himself in a destructive spiral of doom. And that is why, in 2012, he turned himself into what he calls a free-range foodie, offering a variety of services which draw on his lifelong love of foraging, game and field sports, as well as his considerable culinary experience. Now, I'm fascinated by the plethora of jobs and opportunities linked loosely under the hospitality genre. I've employed hundreds of chefs over the last 17 years and seen many look for a career change when the reality of working every weekend starts to have an impact on family life. So when the opportunity to interview Tim cropped up, looking at just how diverse his income streams are, I was excited to find out more. And this edition gives you a snapshot of what it's like to have a varied freelance career. From running a chef's shed, created from old telegraph poles and pallets, to organising ethical, small bag foodie shoot days and more. And incidentally, these small days are supporting a much bigger movement, helping feed 600,000 people in the last 4 years through Tim's work with the Country Food Trust. I very much hope you enjoy this week's conversation. Tim Maddams, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I say joining me, I'm actually joining you because you've kindly opened your kitchen.
Well, so, I mean, I have failed to offer you anything to eat.
True, although, but I've got a drink and I do a drink and tea. They're both drinks, aren't they?
They are both drinks. You've got two drinks.
Yeah.
None of them are alcoholic, even though it's Friday. So well done, you.
Yes, thank you. And we are in Devon, in Yarcombe. What do I need to know about Yarcombe? I think it's my first visit.
Top things about Yarcombe. What are they?
I've got one for you because I just drove past the sign.
Okay.
Do you know what's on the sign? As a local, maybe you don't.
Tell me.
Devon's Town of the Year. Do you know the year?
No.
2005.
Well, there you go.
Written on the sign as you come in.
Before I moved here.
Is it? Have you maybe it could have improved, or I don't know.
And it's upgraded itself from a village to a town as well. That's quite impressive.
It could have said village.
It might have
said
said village.
The year that got me, and the fact that we were in Devon because I hadn't appreciated I'd gone over the border. And I just wondered how it qualified. Would you know what makes it the village/town of the year?
No, I wouldn't have a clue.
No.
I expect some people got together and decided. There was probably a a county-wide competition to decide. And whoever was judging it was a local.
it was Yarcombe's turn. Any massive selling points for Yarcombe that I should know?
Well,
it's
a
here?
fantastic view. It's a lovely place to live. You're just over the border from Somerset, so you're not very far. You're very closely connected to the main trunk road in the area, which is the A30 or the A303. And it's part of the old estate that used to belong to Sir Francis Drake. So there you go.
See, good. I should have given you a bit more warning, wasn't I? I was going to test you on your historical knowledge of
your
town.
I think, I don't feel like a local. I mean, I have lived here for 7 years, but I still don't feel like a local in Yarcombe. It takes a bit longer than that, I think. Yeah. Beautiful village, though. Highly recommend it.
Yeah. Do you know how many people live here? Doesn't look very big. I just drove through it. It was about half a mile.
There's at least 100 of us.
Brilliant.
At least.
That sets the context. 100 people in a little village, and we are overlooking beautiful rolling hills.
Yeah, that is the, you're sort of in the Yarty Valley now, and then the valley you can see beyond out of the back window there, that's the Axe Valley. So if you keep going and follow that along, then you end up at Lyme Regis.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
So that sets the context beautifully. Sorry for everybody listening who can't see which way you're pointing, Tim.
So I've got a great face for radio as well.
Yeah, perfect. Likewise, good. We should probably crack on. So you call yourself the free range foodie, and I wasn't really aware. Apparently, I wasn't aware of this term around portfolio careers until I looked it up last night. I was like, "What's a portfolio career?" So apparently, you are a free ranging portfolio career person or portfolioist. Is that true? What is it?
Well, portfolio career is something that sounds fantastic from the outside, and actually just means you're free.
You're between jobs.
You're free to starve. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's the perfect trade-off. It's the old-fashioned self-employed trade-off, which is when you're busy, it's great, it's fine, everybody's happy, you're your own boss, you're in charge of your own destiny and all of that stuff. When it's quiet or you haven't got much on or you're between projects, it's nothing except horrendously frightening because you can't stop paying your mortgage, right? So it's like that. But then at least that's just a bit more honest, really, because you could be working for someone that you worked for 20 years and they could go under and then you'd be in the same boat. So at least you're responsible for your own car crashes.
Yeah, true. So, and the reason that I was intrigued to come and chat to you, I suppose, is I've spoken to lots of chefs, but they tend to be employed or have their own restaurants. I've spoken to farmers, restaurateurs, all sorts. But I suppose, we hadn't really looked at, because I love the world of hospitality, but how do you make a living in hospitality without having a job? So you do lots and lots of different things, basically, under the umbrella of hospitality, food and drink. Is that a fair
Yeah, that
summary?
is totally fair. So I kind of riff on stuff around food. The bulk of my work, I suppose, is private chef work. So I'll go and work for someone in their house or do a little event for some people in their home or in a holiday home or, in a village hall, that sort of thing. Some pop-up stuff that we promote ourselves. I say we and are. That's pretty much me, although the brilliant Mrs. Maddams does do a great job of keeping me on my toes with administrational matters. And then, we'll occasionally be doing a bit of food media around that.
Perfect. Well, we're going to come into the specifics, I guess, on some of the stuff you've done. And it was actually a thanks to Stephen Lamb who introduced us, wasn't it? Who you've also, I know you do some pop-up stuff with as well. So.
Lambo, what a legend.
Lambo, thank you. And he's been on the podcast, so people can go off and listen. But thank you, Stephen, for your listening. But your career started a little bit more traditionally. So you were a chef in the early days, worked with some fairly well-known... Is that wrong to say in the early... Are you still a chef?
No, I don't. I like to describe myself, it's probably a bit poncy, but I like to describe myself as a sort of chef in recovery, really.
Right.
I was addicted to hospitality. I mean, you love the hospitality industry. I love the hospitality industry. It is full of brilliant, vibrant, wonderful characters. It's also full of abysmal and appalling working conditions, long hours and terrible pay. But that doesn't matter when you're in it and you love it, right? But I think there's a line where perhaps like most things, even with a caffeine addiction, right? It can be great to get you going in the morning, but it's really not a good thing long term. And I think I just get a bit too obsessed with what I'm doing. And having spent sort of 20 years in and around restaurants, it was definitely time for a bit of a change.
So in those early days before you realised that it was occasionally hell on earth and occasionally wonderful, when you thought it was just wonderful, where did it start? Who were you working with in the early days? I'm right in saying you were up in London working with...
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, well, I did the
Alastair
traditional
Ferguson
thing. So I went to college in Salisbury. I did that, which was attached to Southampton at the time. I don't know if it still is, but we did that, which was great. And then went and worked for a bit at Centre Parks in Longley Forest. Had a great fun time there.
I have a couple of young children. We don't go anymore, but back a few years. Spent a good few weeks
did that
there
for a bit. Decided that 70-hour weeks for the amount of money I was getting paid as a junior wasn't really kind of feeling like a long-term thing, so I binned it off and went skiing for a couple of years out in France. Lovely. Where I didn't earn much money, but I had a great time and immersed myself quite nicely in some French food and a lot of skiing, so that was quite good. Came back, did a very brief spell with Babington House, which was quite a new venture at the time. The head chef there left, and as you do, in the chefing world, if you like the head chef and they leave, you tend to follow them. So I wandered off up to London and worked with him for a couple of, a short spell, 3 or 4 weeks, I think, at St John's for Fergus Henderson. And then a guy rocked up there, and I love this about London, was the guy who rocked up there to take the job from me. I'd been filling in for the guy who'd left, and this guy was coming to take the job. And as he walked in, and we got him set up and showed him through the service and got chatting, and he said, "Oh, so where are you going from here?" And I said, "Well, I haven't got a job this afternoon, mate." And he said, "Oh, well, look, you should go and talk to Alastair because they haven't found anyone where I've come from." And I said, "Alastair who?" He said, "Alastair Little." I said, "Oh, okay." He's a guy I sort of recognise because him and Gary Rhodes and Mr. Turner and a few other people were doing some interesting sort of slightly more trad stuff, I guess, through the late 80s, 90s and early noughties, when everything in London was pretty much sort of haute cuisine, feathered sauces, plate on a food with a protractor, and it was pre-tweezers, but we were heading that way. And I was not into that at all. So I quite liked the more rustic side of things. So went and had a chat with Alastair Little, got a fantastic job as a chef de partie in their Lancaster Road branch, which was cool, with a guy named Tony and a sous chef called Luigi, who was mental but also very cool. So I had a baptism of fire there for about a year, I think, and then I went and did a couple of projects with White Star Line with a guy named Adam Clark, who was known as Wolfie, and he ran kitchens for Marco Pierre White under Timmy Payne, who anyone in the industry at the time from London will probably recognise some of those names. From there, I went and did an independent project with Tony and Florence, who'd run Alastair Little's. And then from there, I went and worked for a very short time for Mark Hicks. Didn't get on with the head chef at Rewington Grill, so just took my luggage and left. Went back to work for Adam, who was by this point at the One Aldwych Hotel. And I ended up as junior sous chef there, I think. And I that was the only time I ever planned a career move in my entire career. I thought, I've done all this stuff. It's all been about me and food and doing the cool things I want to do. I need to do something grown up where I learn some management and work for a bigger company. So I went to work for the One Aldwych Hotel and spent sort of 5 months bumping my head against a brick wall as I sort of realised that there was nothing creative about this job and that it really didn't suit me. And then Mark Gregory, who's a really good guy, who runs the Le Chef brand. Right. Do you know the Denny's brands? Yep. Guys make all the cool chef gear. He's back in New Zealand now, but he was chef of the year here and in New Zealand. Really nice guy, and didn't have to do this at all. But he said, "Tim, this is not for you. This is really not for you. But while you're here, I think you're a good guy. Could you just come up with and run the pre and post theatre menus?" And I was like, yeah, okay. So I basically got to develop with the other chefs there. Everyone sort of chucked some dishes in the hat, but I got to look after it. We sort of created once a fortnight and developed this menu that would run for a fortnight, pre and post theatre. And then that was my main responsibility, to look after that. And that was perfect. I did that for, I think, another year. And then a friend of mine, Fiona, who'd also been at Alastair Little's, she was running the catering for the Ferrari team sponsors in the F1 world. She gave me a shout and said, "Look, do you want to come and do this for a year? Because I need someone." So I did that and then did it for another year.
Right, that sounds quite glamorous. I'm just thinking of the sales call. So, sorry, what is it again? F1, which team? Ferrari?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that travelling around like the great circus that travels around the show?
Yeah, so we would do Europe. So I work for a UK company called Procar International, and they build they call them motorhomes, which is a bit of a euphemism, right? So this one was 7 Arctic lorries stacked up on top of each other with one of the Arctic lorries was this amazing kitchen that we designed and built. And then we had this 2-floor glass-fronted building with offices either side and a restaurant on each floor. That would literally go from circuit to circuit. Exactly, God, yeah. Incredible, yeah, pretty cool. But, I mean, glamour, the thing about glamour is it's not real, right? So it was interesting and fun for the first year. I did it a second year, which was great. But by the end of the second year, I was like, I've done this. Who were you cooking for? The drivers or the Occasionally, mostly guests of the corporate entertainment kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. So Philip Morris Tobaccos at the time, Martini, a couple of other big brands, Electrolux and people like that. So they were there and they wanted to impress people, so they would bring them into the palette. And you were given a lot of freedom to dish-wise there? Yeah, to a degree. I mean, the second year, Fiona left and they brought in an Italian head chef, a guy called Vincenzo. He was a different style of cook, I guess. And, he liked carving fruit. I felt like there were various reasons that it wasn't going to work long-term. Right. With him, and he felt the same about me. So we politely coughed and separated at that point.
Fine. But all the way through that, then you were naturally drawn to the more creative side. I know, some of the menus there were sort of almost changed on a daily basis.
Yeah, all the time,
not probably so much with the F1, but with some of the other restaurants. And that was your natural tendency, less the formulaic kind of make the same stuff every night, and more the what ingredients are coming through the door today and what can we make with it. Is that fair?
Yeah. So I don't know when. In fact, I don't know when it became the thing for chefs to write a menu and then order the stuff for the menu they'd written. But that is arse about face, and it is I'm not going to apologise for my opinions about this because they're well thought out.
Because they're right, is that what you were telling me?
No, but they're opinions. And you'll notice I didn't say whether they were right or wrong. I said
they were well thought out.
They are well thought out, but they're still my opinions. And as James Wetler once said to me, who I think is another guy you've had to a podcast
right
with,
in the early days, Cabrito goes. Yeah.
He and I had a dynamic relationship for a short period while he was sous chef for me at River Cottage, and we had a discussion about opinions quite a lot because we had differing opinions, and we're both quite driven people, certainly very passionate about what we believe in. And he said to me, Tim, I used to have an Australian sous chef, and he once said to me, the thing about opinions, Tim, is they're a lot like arseholes. Everyone's got one, they all stink, and nobody's interested in yours. And I'll always remember James saying that to me because it was incredibly funny.
Yeah.
But we are all entitled to our opinions, and I believe that you should get to know the producers of food near to you. You should get the best stuff that's available to you locally, and you should allow it to inspire your menu rather than the other way round.
No, I would agree with that. Do you think it gets more challenging the bigger the restaurant gets?
Yeah, because you have to have more people with a certain level of skill, and there are a shortage of those, and there are a shortage of those that want to keep doing it because everyone wants to progress. So the difficulty is that everyone wants to roll everything out, and because that makes the person at the top more money, but ultimately it just creates more problems and moves you further away from that honest offer that you wanted to start with, if that's your vibe.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably not even there, but I think a lot of, I'm going to use the word proper chefs, whatever that is, love that style, and proper restaurateurs. I love the concept of, we did it with our fish, it's just, a day catch the box, just bring in the fish, whatever you catch, bring it, and we'll make something with it. And that's how I prefer to cook. My wife loves to follow a recipe. I love to just go into the cupboard, open and see what's there. But actually, when you're trying to control margins in an incredibly tight industry, and you've got a brigade, and some of the brigade absolutely understand how to prepare and work fast, but some of them just want to be told what they need to do, and if anybody makes a mistake, you lose one bit of fish, and all of a sudden the margin on all the other 30 bits of fish you've made go. It's a challenge, I think. But is that how it works? Because you ended up at River Cottage in Axminster.
I did. And I basically had this conversation that we're starting to have now every Tuesday in a board meeting. It was an incredible challenge to set up that scenario and make it work, and we never made a huge amount of money out of it. I'll give you that. It did make money, and it did continue to do so. And shortly before I finished working for them, we got it up to three units, which were all at the time independently doing their own thing with their own microclimate of suppliers and producing their own menus within guidelines, which was pretty special. And at the time, I'm fairly convinced unique in the south of England anyway. Anyway, that was good fun. Did that for 4.5 years with River Cottage, and then did a couple of years teaching for them and wrote a book with them, and then a bit of another book with them, and had a lot of fun with Hugh and the guys and Gil and Steve and all that lot.
Back in the days. In what, I don't know, just, it looked like a really nice period for River Cottage, but there's a lot of you who aren't there anymore, or just occasionally do some freelance stuff with them.
This is what happens, right? I mean, life moves on, and I think whilst it is true that you should never burn a bridge, I also think you should build new ones. Otherwise, life gets very dull.
Absolutely. Yeah. So some people might recognise you because you did end up on the telly doing some cooking with Hugh, I think, didn't you?
I did do a bit of, I was on the telly. My what happened when I left River Cottage was that my famous mutton chop sideburns went off and got a solo career, and they're doing very well for themselves. And I'm a bit like, so it was like when Take That split up, I'm not doing so well. But I've never had the same goals as my sideburns. They always wanted to be rich and famous.
Did they?
Yeah.
Did they move around different people, or are they with someone specific at the moment?
They're absolute media whores, those two, I'll tell you.
So was it post River Cottage that you went, you know what, I'm going to be my own boss now? Was that, or did that just evolve, or was it an overnight? Did something happen that triggered you to go, I'm going to do this on my own?
My mental health and my general well-being. You know, I had a 2-year-old son, and I remember this very distinctly. So the pressure of 4.5 years full on doing that had obviously started to get to me, and I was beginning to not be able to see the way out of the woods anymore in terms of leaving work at home. And we were getting busier at River Cottage as well, and there were multiple sites to manage and different people to have relationships with at work in terms of management structure. And I was beginning to get diminished, I think, in terms of myself. And I had a holiday in Cyprus with some family. And my little boy was there, obviously. And at the beginning of that holiday, Daddy was my name, and I was someone who was occasionally in the house. And at the end of that holiday, I was my son's father. And I distinctly remember stopping on my way into work when we got back from the holiday and just thinking, this is over. This stops now. And, you know, we was working... I don't want to argue over the sort of averages, but we were definitely doing 70 plus hours a week over on an average, and filming on days off, and all of that stuff was voluntary, but you know, you want to pour yourself into stuff. And I realized I was being very selfish, and that I was really not looking after myself either. And so jacked it all in.
And that was that. That's why I wanted to come and have a chat with you, because I see, you know, I've been in hospitality for 20 years. I've employed and worked with hundreds of chefs, and it feels like a sort of an odd contradiction for the industry that we spend so much time looking after other people and their birthdays and their anniversaries and encouraging people to spend time with their families. Yet the industry, you know, used to give people an absolute kind of pasting, and not necessarily voluntarily, not because all the bosses are arseholes, but because you know, the restaurants are naturally busy when other people are off. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Chefs naturally want the food to be amazing, and therefore, even if they're not being forced to, they want to be in when the deliveries are coming in the morning, because they want to make sure the produce is amazing, and then they want to prep it and serve it that night. So it is an all-in industry. And I think the industry is now trying really hard, whether just because it feels more morally obliged to, or whether... you cynic, or whether because it's being demanded in the fact there's a shortage of chefs, and it's kind of going.
I think that might be
certainly from my perspective.
Yeah,
probably both. It's difficult for me because I'm a bit of a hippie. I always think people should live an amazing life, and I run a restaurant on a beach because I think life is about living on the beach and having a nice time.
But your vibe is the exception rather than the rule.
Exactly.
And I think from my own personal journey, and that's the only one I can talk about, and I just said journey, so you can all slag me off on social media for being poncy. But for me, I was right at the tail end of the rock and roll chef stuff in London. And so I was indoctrinated into that. Work hard, play hard, get the job done. Don't think about how you feel. Just nail it, deliver it, carry on the next day. You're a machine, you're bulletproof, all that jazz. And I think I sort of carried that selfish mental philosophy with me for quite a while, and just ignored a lot of opportunities perhaps where I could have said, actually, do you know what? I'm quite happy just running this one. Yeah. And I still haven't got a good sous chef. Can I please have another one? Kind of thing. And I didn't. I was like, let's get the next one done. Let's find some people. Let's make this happen. Let's do that. And it was a self-destructive spiral of doom is about the only way I can put it. And I'm very, very, very lucky that I have such a strong life partner in my wife, Caroline, that she made me realise that before I fell apart, because most chefs I know who've had similar experiences, and there's quite a few of them, both male and female, have a full-on breakdown and have to start all over again. And I think I was approaching that point. I consider myself lucky not to have gone over the edge. Yeah,
and that all too often, disappointingly, is the trajectory. There is the other side that, particularly I think in the younger years, the amount that you can learn. I've had chefs go up and do stages, and a head chef who would work bonkers amount of hours when he was actually with me, you know, loving his job, and I'd be trying to encourage him to have time off, and I'd enforce him, you know, like, right, the season's coming, you know, we're coming to have 2 weeks off, and he would go to London and volunteer in like a Michelin-starred restaurant for 2 weeks and work from, you know, dawn till dusk, but he'd come back buzzing with so many photos and videos and energized by what he'd seen. So I think you can learn an incredible amount. So I think it's wrong in some ways to tell young chefs just to focus on the hours and the money in those early years. I think if you can go up to London and you can get that experience and you can learn some stuff, do it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think the flip side is, don't do it too long.
Yeah, maybe don't party every night either.
And I think that's changing, from what I hear, and I probably
yeah.
see it, is that they don't drink as much now. Well, they, they used to go out, finish work and go out. Now they finish work and go to the gym.
I know. Isn't that fantastic? I think that's really good.
Yeah.
I genuinely think that is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And it is to be applauded, and God bless them, may they continue. And look, I mean, the reason I can cook the way that I can cook now is because of the broad experience that I fitted into a very short period in my life. And one of the ways, because I teach a lot of cookery courses these days to people, not industry people, keen cooks. And one of the ways I describe the sort of feel, the natural feel that all cooks have when they're professional for how stuff's cooking and how it's getting on, that weird sort of force-like sixth sense that something in the oven's nearly ready, is that by the time I'd been a professional chef working in my first restaurant kitchen for 1 year, I cooked more meals than most people cook in their entire lifetime. And if you multiply that onwards by a 20-year career in professional restaurant kitchens, that's 20 plus lifetimes of cookery instilled in one person before they're 30, or before they're 40 rather. So that's some seriously refined wisdom, right? I mean, you've worked with a lot of people who have opinions. You've picked up the ones you like, you've toyed with them, you've changed them, you tweaked them, you've made them your own. You've experienced other people's, you've read their books, you've had nightmares, you've had joyous, realistic situations occur. And all of that comes together and gets boiled down into this foodie culture that is yours.
It's very true. So I will have a number of chefs listening to this and a number of people who are just interested in food. But I guess, again, coming back to that reason to chat, I suppose, is that it's not the only way. You can get out of it. Fair play to you for kind of noticing that you weren't on the right trajectory and you wanted some freedom. And as somebody who spent the last 20 years in hospitality, even at my level, you kind of go, man, restaurants are really hard. There is another way out.
Well, the thing about restaurants is they never stop being hard.
Yes,
I love restaurants. I love them way too much. But the problem is you fix them. You make them well. Every day you make them well. And the next day they're sick again. And you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. And as soon as you stop looking at it, as soon as you stop for 1 minute and take your eye off that ball, like you were saying, you've lost your margin, or you've lost a key member of staff, or something else horrendous has happened. You get a bad score on TripAdvisor, or you get a bad result from a hygiene inspection. All the other sort of tedious nuts and bolts that go with running a beast that is a kitchen and a restaurant as a larger animal.
Yeah.
Why can't it just be fixed now?
I don't know. It's the word I always use. People always say, "How's it going? How's it going?" And I'm like, "It's relentless." Is the word I use. Yeah. It never stops and pauses for breath, but it is good fun. So, having come out the other side now, and we'll talk a little bit about what you do. Different quality of life. What do you say to the kind of younger chefs, the people you speak to? Is it all roses? It's kind of like, oh, I did that, now I do this, and I've absolutely nailed it. It's amazing. Or is it the reality? You know what? It's still challenging. There's still complications around being self-employed.
Of course there are. I mean, number one, you're free to starve, right? No one's driving work to your door every day. Okay, so that's number one golden rule, is if you're not busy, make yourself busy, because if you're quiet, nothing's going to happen. You need to keep busy. And it's a rule I've had to learn a few times, and we still haven't quite got it nailed. And also, you are number one sacrifice in any sort of downturn scenario. So if I'm, say, for example, working with 2 or 3 different corporate partners, we might be doing a bit of staff development with a pub chain, just some interesting foraging stuff with them, and then a couple of pop-ups. And then we might be doing some beer pairing, say with a brewery or a cider maker or something like that. As soon as something economic takes a little downturn or slows down seasonally or whatever, the first thing they get binned, as we all know in these businesses, is the externals, the consultants, the people like me that are sort of trying to make a living off other people's livings in a way. And that's not because what we do isn't valuable, useful and worthwhile. It's simply that there's a cost that we can manage easily. Let's manage it. And also you get to the end of projects. So I did some brilliant work with the guys up at the Thatcher's Cider Empire in Somerset. And Martin Thatcher's a really nice guy. I did lots of food development project work with them, which was all about matching their drinks to dishes, and we took that around the country and we went to London with it, and we did some loads of fun and games. But after 3.5 years of involvement with Thatcher's, it was like time for someone new to come and do some stuff, right? So stuff naturally comes to an end as well. So there's all of that. Then you've got the horrible, horrendous nonsense of running your own business. Like, oh, that looks like money. Let's spend that on something. No, that's your tax. You need that. And then, I've got to run my own website and I've got to be able to do this. And can I do that myself because it will save me money? Oh, and now I need to do social media. I mean, who invented social media? I want to find them. I want to find them because it takes a lot of time and it's very difficult
anti-social media.
Always see the rewards. So it's not easy being on your own, but it is you, and there's nowhere to hide, and it's quite enjoyable, and it's no more up and down than the life of running a restaurant. But paying the bills can always be fun.
Be a challenge. Yeah. Well, we might come back to that, but let's go into some of the stuff you do. So private chefing is one arm you've got. And what's this? This is turning up, people having private parties. This is less corporate. Is this kind of more people's homes? They're having a party. They've got friends coming over. You turn up and throw them a party.
Exactly.
And that must be quite different because you're you're used to commercial kitchens and rationales and all your toys and stuff like that. Is it different when you walk into somebody's domestic kitchen and go, oh right, okay, this is
I mean, some people have definitely not been paying attention when the kitchen salesman's been there. Some of them are better equipped than any kitchen I ever worked in London, albeit on a smaller scale. And some of them are an Arga that no one's lit, and that can be challenging.
Is that stressful? I'm just thinking, a chef walking into service in their own restaurant, all right, they might have 100 people coming for dinner, but at least they know they've done the prep. They've got a sous chef and a CDP who's prepped for them all day, and they're walking in and they know their kit works. But I don't know, I'm guessing that it's a limited amount of, presumably you're not there the day before or 3 days before.
Well, it depends on the contract. So some people will say, okay, we've got guests coming to the house in the borders of Scotland for a week, and can you come and do 5 days? Fine. Okay. In which case you settle in, you get to know the kit, bits and pieces. Other times, no, you're just literally parachuting in at 5 o'clock in the evening. You've got a dinner party for 18 people, and you want to nail it. So you've got your prep done. I've got a little semi-commercial kitchen on a little unit up a little farm lane near here, and that's fine. We can get a lot of prep done there. But I never anymore. I used to, but I never anymore travel without a spare gas burner in the back of the van and a barbecue just in case.
I was going to say, is that off the back of, have you had any that have gone horrendously wrong where you've had to particularly wing it?
No, we've always got away with it, but there have been moments, there were definitely in the early days, there were moments where I was like, okay, it's going to be slightly more of a challenge than I'd have liked it to be.
Yeah, cold starters, cold dessert, and a sandwich. Yeah.
Not quite that bad, but we've been close a few times, definitely.
And again, a lot of people I speak to, particularly when they go out on their own and it's a bit of consultancy or a bit of freelance work, one of the challenging things is working out what you should charge and what you're worth. You alluded just now to kind of like, you think you're taking a certain amount of money, but then you find there's a website to pay for and there's the tax man to pay for. And you're quite straight in the fact that your prices for your various roles are on your website. Did it take a long time to work out what you should charge for a day? Or?
Well, you have to approach it from both directions. You've got to look at what you think the market will sustain, and you've got to look at what the competition are doing, who might have much lower overheads than you, because when you're self-employed, your overheads are your mortgage and your vehicle and your kitchen, right? And then also in the world of private chefing or I suppose event catering on the small scale of things, you've got a lot of competition who are not necessarily playing from the same rule book as you in terms of ingredients, and that can be a challenge in terms of people's vision of value. Generally, what I find is if a job's worth doing, they're prepared to pay the money to do it. We have a lot of long-standing repeat clients, and that gives me confidence that what we're doing is right. And we've structured it so that the first day is expensive because that includes all of your prep time, unless it's a long event, and it includes all the emailing backwards and forwards and the arrangements and the administration that goes in and the doing your hygiene course every other year and all the bits and pieces. And then it gets significantly cheaper for the next day, and it stays at that rate as long as you keep booking consecutive days. So we don't pick up a lot of work for 6 people having dinner because it's cost prohibitive for us to do it. People look at it and go, actually, no. But we also have a sort of a slightly cheaper option too. So if you want to book me for an evening, and I'll come and hang out in your kitchen for a couple of hours with you and a bunch of mates, and we will literally just eat for a couple of hours. We call them kitchen tables, and they're good fun. They're much more casual than a sort of traditional private chef booking, if you like. It's a bit more sort of laid back and bantery.
Nice. Yeah, that would definitely appeal more to me. But
if you get 10 mates together, markets, which is only 5 couples, right? That comes in at 50 quid a head plus a bit of mileage and a few ingredients. I mean, it's not. No, I mean, you'd spend that at the pub, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mine's ticking. We'll have a party, Tim. The chef shed. What's that?
The chef shed. Oh, the chef shed's a brilliant thing. It's as much a concept as a place, and it's kind of, it boils down nicely to what we were talking about earlier in the way that I like to cook. So the chef shed is literally a shed on a friend's dairy farm at the end of that valley over there in the middle of the Axe Valley. Nigel and Emma Paris, they have a little dairy herd in the middle of Stockland, and they also have a glamping site, Ala Farm Glamping, which is really luxurious. And they said, we want you to do some stuff here. Can you do some stuff here? And I said, well, I can't just, can't do it in the milking parlour. We can't just sort of cook in someone's tent. That's not going to work. And so they said, oh, well, we thought we could build you a shed.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I quite like the idea of a shed. Let's have a shed. So got some old telegraph poles and pallets and things that were lying about on the farm and built a shed, into which I put a gas campfire. We have a little fire bowl outside, and there's a little wood burning oven as well. And then obviously I prep the stuff in a nice semi-professional kitchen up the road, and then we go down there and we do pop-ups in there most of the summer.
Right.
Yeah.
These are just open to the public then?
Yeah,
or is this specifically the people that are staying on the...
They can book if they want to, but we release the dates online. We send them out in our newsletter, and we advertise them on social media, and it's 45 quid, and you pay your money, you bring your own drinks, and we feed you 4 courses plus a load of nibbles. So I mean, it's nice, and everything's influenced by where we are. So the chef shed is like a rubber mat. It's like a lead weight on the rubber mat of the local foodie scene. Everything just sort of rolls towards it. And I never make any money because I'm always like, yeah, let's have that. That's going to be great. Oh, why have we got the world's most expensive turbot on the menu? Because it's awesome.
Yeah, nice. That's the danger, isn't it? It's just too much fun.
Well, where else can you roast 4 massive turbot in a wood-fired oven and stick them on the table as a course?
That's awesome. So is it literally kind of sharing style, long bench table kind of thing?
I try and plate sort of at least 2 of the 4 courses in case you've got people with greedy elbows.
Right.
But we tend to feed people quite hard with the canapes too. So generally speaking, it's very good value. And if it is served in a sharing format, then we're normally quite careful about managing that.
Yeah. And do you tend to invite, I'm thinking of, the likes of Stephen Lamb and all the various contacts you must hopefully, do you join up? Does it tend to be a collaborative kind of approach?
I do try and get, so Steve has come and done a chef shed, and so have a couple of other people, and we're every summer I think, I need to put together a list of great other people to come and do this, and then sort of that runs into the business angle of it a little bit, and I go, actually, then I've got to pay them. And I still don't get that night off. So maybe I'll do it myself. But I will, I am determined this summer, if we're still here, to do a few more collaborative evenings there, because it is just a nice thing to do.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm gonna look out for it before you move to Scotland. We'll come back to that. And then another string to your bow is the field sports side of the business.
Yeah,
so what's that? How does that work?
Well, I mean, I've always loved shooting, fishing, deer stalking, in the same way that I'm in love with mushroom foraging and hedgerow foraging and seashore foraging. I struggle to draw a definition between them. I mean, food comes from the environment in whatever way you want to do that. There are good ways of doing that, bad ways of doing that. Some people find certain types of it, like lots of people would never pick their own wild mushroom, right? I get that. Lots of people would never want to kill their own animal but are happy to eat meat. And lots of people never want to interact with a fish or eat another piece of wild garlic as long as they live. But one of the things when I left River Cottage was I was very kindly asked by Hugh if I would write one of the River Cottage handbook series of books. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And they said, which one would you like to do? I said, I'll do game, shall I? Hasn't been done. And they went, yeah, okay. let's do that. I'm sure if anyone can write a River Cottage book on game, it'll be you. I don't think they realised that I'd never written anything before in my life. I think Bloomsbury very quickly realised that. But we got there in the end.
How long did it take?
I think we had 18 months to write it and photograph it.
So it took 1 month.
It was 2 years.
The 18th. Oh no, you did actually start it early.
Yeah. Well, I sort of dipped in and out. I mean, it's quite a good thing when you're self-employed to have a long-term project like that going on in the background, because when you're quiet, you can crack on with that. So because of that, I'm quite well known for, stalking, which is not what you think it is. It's the act of hunting deer with a rifle and shooting pigeons, rabbits, pheasants, all that stuff. And that for me, that's quite a natural fit, because I've always been obsessed with where food comes from. I think it just comes from being a greedy child, really. And once you realise that blackberries cost nothing, you sort of start to get into it. From there, you head into mushrooms and wild herbs, and then you start thinking about poaching a few trout out of the Wiley with a bread crust and a bit of string, and then you have to sort of head down the gun route and things get a bit more scary and grown up, but that's a natural progression. And lots of people are interested in foraging and aren't interested in shooting, and lots of people aren't interested in shooting and interested in foraging, and all the way around that spectrum with the fishing thrown in too, there's various different viewpoints and people find their own way through that. I find it difficult to draw a distinction between them. I mean, for me, they're all just part of absorbing food from the environment. And I like about it, as much about foraging and shooting and hunting together, is it's really good for engendering a sense of understanding and respect for where your food comes from.
Yeah. Okay. How does this? I'm thinking around, I suppose, maybe the controversy, but the land management is hunting and stalking and pheasants, all that kind of stuff. Is that part of the natural way that the land needs to be managed in the countryside?
No.
Or is this a fun activity?
It's interesting, isn't it? So there's two ways to answer that question. Okay. First and foremost, pheasant shooting is a great example. It's the one that everyone knows and everyone understands, so let's talk about it. Okay, pheasants come from Asia. They are not a native English bird. They are reared in their millions and released for the business and sport of shooting. The fact that they end up being food is a secondary consideration. They're not hunted from a subsistence point of view. Okay, this is something that people who have got a few quid like to do. That's not saying that everyone who goes shooting is posh and loaded. That's not the case at all. But if you can afford a shotgun and some cartridges, you've definitely got more money than a lot of other people. So the other way to look at it is to say, is shooting a positive or a negative for conservation in the UK? And I would advocate 100% that shooting is a net positive for conservation, because it creates diversity of habitat and it has various different it adds value to land uses that perhaps would not be used in other ways. So it's a good thing overall, I think. Some of the aspects of more commercial shooting will change in the future, and I think are not necessarily doing a huge amount of favours to us. That's not to say that a day where 500 birds are shot is a bad day intrinsically. There are a lot of places doing that incredibly well, making sure that all the birds are used, making sure that the habitat is not overly damaged by having that high volume of birds on the ground. And there are a few places that aren't doing it very well, but the market will take care of those. And the business of shooting is currently in the process of self-regulating. So there's a lot of changes going on there. I actually sit as a trustee for a charity called the Country Food Trust, because I was a bit alarmed about the number of pheasants getting shot in the UK. And I'll put those numbers into context in a sec. And it seemed very clear to me that somebody should be buying that pheasant and turning it into meals for people in need. And that's now happening. I wasn't, key in getting it off the ground. That all happened independently, but I've been working with the charity for the last sort of 3 or 4 years. And we've just fed over 600,000 people in the last 4 years. And we're aiming to get to 1 million by the end of the next shooting season, which will be February next year. Right. So that's quite a
so who are you feeding with that?
People in need. So we feed via food banks and redistribution centres like Fair Share. We work with over 1,100 other charities. So it's quite...
You're not just giving them a dead pheasant. Are you turning them into dishes?
No.
We
do two things. I'm
thinking that they might not have the know-how to go, I'll just hang that in my garage.
If you were properly hungry, and none of us are more than 3 days away and 2 cancelled drops from being that hungry, okay? It can happen to anyone. I've met a lot of people in the last few years who are relying on food banks, who are homeless or on the brink of homelessness or living in sheltered accommodation or just really in trouble. And that could be you and me in a fortnight's time, particularly given what's about to hit the country. And actually, I think if you were 3 days hungry and someone presented you with a pheasant, you'd very quickly learn how to work it out. But of course, a lot of people don't have cooking facilities, and that's an issue. So we do 2 things. We make long life, ultra heat treated pouches. It's a brilliant process called retorting. It's horrendous. If you want to really ruin something that you've cooked really nicely, stick it in a retort pouch and heat treat it for 3 hours. That'll do it nicely. Okay. If you imagine a tin product but in a plastic pouch, all right, they're plastic. They shouldn't be plastic, single-use plastic, but they're an awful lot lighter to move around than tins, which actually has a carbon benefit. Anyway, we can't go into the ins and outs of it. We use pouches at the moment. We're looking at alternatives. So we have these ready meals, which don't even need to be refrigerated, and which can be literally opened and eaten from the pack. So if you're in a situation where you're sleeping rough, they can be handed out to you via a service provider. And then through FareShare and other networks, we also provide pallets or 5 kilo frozen bags of diced game meat to places where they're cooking stuff. And we've also got a raft of great chefs on board who've all donated recipes, which we've then had the fantastic James Murphy up in London has very kindly donated his time to photograph those recipes. And that's a download that's available to the charity kitchens that we work with. So they're not just getting this. I mean, back in the early days, Tim Woodward, who's the CEO of the charity, he went to the charities initially and said, look, we've got all this pheasant meat. Are you interested? Expecting everyone to go, no, we don't want that. It's got lead in it. It's, unethical as far as we're concerned. It's too controversial. And they all went, oh, yes, please. We'd love some protein, because everyone's giving us vegetables. Everyone's giving us pasta. Everyone's giving us loads of stuff. What we really need is good quality protein, and actually we're in a great position to be able to provide that. So we're moving a lot of game now, and we just need to keep raising the money to keep that going.
Okay, so that's good. So before that, a lot of that would have been wasted then?
Well, wasted to a degree. It was sloshing around in the marketplace. Some of it was going for animal feed. Some of it was not making it as far as a game dealer. It was being rendered or incinerated, if you like. That's not to say that nothing gets rendered or incinerated now. Some birds, when they're shot at, and picked up by these are animals that are then picked up by a dog, they're not always in the prime condition that they would need to be to go to market. There are always going to be a few casualties, but the vast majority of shot game in this country gets eaten.
Right.
End of.
Okay.
But I mean, I hope for a day when there'll be, people will get more fun out of a day's shooting than just counting the number of birds they've shot. And
well, I think you're impacting that. So your days are also around the cooking and the social side, and they're much smaller scale. Am I right in saying how does it work? How does a day with Tim in the field
a day with Tim Maddams Field Sports?
Yes.
It consists of a small day's shooting with a big day's feel. So we have fantastic, hospitality. You arrive in the morning, you have breakfast, have a good old chinwag, you get a safety briefing, and we'll go off and we'll shoot. And everyone will get some shooting and we'll have a nice day. And let's say there are 6 or 7 guns shooting, we'll probably shoot 30 or 50 pheasants. That sounds like a lot. But that's quite a small day by modern standards. And then, we're having 11s in the field, which I've carefully prepared myself, and some organic beers and some local charcuterie made with the game from the shoot. And then we'll serve game at lunch, which we have at the end. We're just packaging everything up so that we're selling an experience rather than a how many numbers of birds we're going to kill kind of day, which is much more like the world of shooting I was familiar with in my childhood.
Yeah.
And for me, my own personal opinions, there's nothing against anyone who is mad keen on doing a lot more shooting, because if you only get to shoot 3 or 4 days a year, you probably want bigger days. If you are of the growing number of people who shoot a bit more than that, perhaps you want to spread that out a bit more over the season. So we are part of the big and wonderful varied world that is shooting, but we're a very sort of niche market.
And so you wrote a book around the game side of it.
Yeah.
So this was recipes. This was what the history of game, where it comes from. I mean, are we seeing a changing kind of perspective from the public? Is this a growing area of our diet? Is it something that used to be really big and is kind of coming back into vogue? What's your general kind of feelings around gaming?
Did it used to be really big? I mean, if you go back a couple of thousand years, game was the only meat being eaten, right? Yeah. Obviously, we farm meat now. And I would just want to quickly touch on those numbers, right? Because I said there are millions of game birds reared and released in the UK. And if we put that number of pheasants, partridge and mallard at, say, 115 million birds, you go, wow, what? That's an insane number. And it's a big number. It's quite a big number compared to 10,000, right? But if we then say, okay, well, in this country, every year, 800 million chickens are reared and killed. And we probably import roughly the same amount as that from places like Asia, where animal welfare is really tip top. That starts to put that number into some kind of perspective. That doesn't mean to say that eating chicken's bad and eating pheasant's good. That would be to oversimplify a situation. But I think it is good to put that number, that sort of slightly scary reared and released game bird number, into some kind of context. But yes, compared to 5 years ago, the game market in the UK is growing. People are eating a little bit more. Export's quite strong, although what Brexit will do to that, I don't quite know. Lots of people are eating it. Chefs love to work with it because it's different. Healthy eating people are quite keen on venison in particular, but also pheasant and partridge because it's much lower in fat and cholesterol and much higher in some source vitamins and things. So yeah, overall it's a good thing to be eating. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that anyone who isn't eating any meat suddenly started eating pheasant, right? That's up to them. But I think if everybody who eats meat eats game a couple of times a year, if not more often, they'll start to appreciate it and have a bit more variety. It's got some flavour and some texture to it. A lot of modern industrially farmed meat. Industrial, that's not quite the right word, is it? But
intensive.
Yeah, or large scale farmed meat for mass production for supermarkets can be very flat, flavourless, flabby, and not that great. So for people who perhaps don't have access to top grade, locally reared amazing meat, game is a good way of engaging with some of that, and it can be very cheap at certain times of the year, or free if you know someone who shoots.
Yeah, seems to be a bit of a. I often wonder why it's not more popular, and whether it's a reluctance around some of the species and cooking because it's a little bit unusual and a little bit different. Do you try and turn that into a simpler thing in the book?
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, first we talk you through the whole thing, so we go through all the species of game that are available, and we talk about the difficult arguments. The reared game versus the wild game. So we've talked about the reared game a little bit. Let's talk about wild game. Let's take pigeon, one of my favourite birds to shoot, one of my favourite birds to eat. The wood pigeon is number one agricultural pest in the United Kingdom. Anyone who's ever stayed in the hotel as a young farmers conference will probably attest that that's not true and that it's drunk young farmers, but it's different meaning for agricultural pest. So pigeons cause millions of pounds worth of crop damage every year because they are now overwintering in bigger numbers because of the way we farm. So pigeon numbers have increased as an incidental factor of the way that we've changed farming. So pigeons have to be shot because there's no other way of controlling them effectively. If you scare them, they move to someone else's field and damage their crop. Ultimately, you're still damaging the national crop. So pigeons tend to get shot. They then tend to get eaten. So they are then incidental meat, right, of part of our agricultural system. And so whether you never want to eat a pheasant or whatever, as long as you live, if you eat meat and you understand ethical arguments, then to not eat pigeon is pretty mad. And I would almost go so far as to say it is protecting various important vegetable crops that would be incredibly difficult to farm in a financially useful way if you didn't control them at all. So pigeon is very nearly a sort of vegan approved meat, right? I mean, if you want your Weetabix, you've got to shoot pigeons.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? I think this is where the interrelationship is nuanced, isn't it? Because I think vegans would argue that, Oh
no, cool. That's probably a bad choice of words. But if you want to talk about ethical meats, you're really going to struggle in the UK to find anything more ethical than pigeon and venison.
Yeah. But in the same way, if you're going to talk about ethical vegetables, people need to realise that actually to grow the vegetables, you need to get rid of the pigeons. So just because you're only eating vegetables, potentially, It's a nuanced and more complicated subject than people sometimes like to say, I suppose. So,
agreed. It's probably all too much for one short podcast as well.
And you say short, but
sorry.
Others might argue not short enough.
I can take up all the available oxygen once I get started. Sorry.
Yeah, mainly my brother actually who says that. So with all of that, you've got this. I love it. I love the fact that you've carved this kind of eclectic niche. It's not one thing. I now know what a portfolio career is, which is nice. It's clearly got its pros and cons. Pleased you did it? Pleased you made the change?
Yeah. Well, yeah. From a life point of view, no doubt whatsoever. I have. So after I gave up my job at River Cottage and my son was 2, my daughter was born and she's now nearly 8. And so I've got to be very involved at home in the really early years of my children's childhoods. And that is something I will never regret, no matter how badly those sort of decade of dodgy finance has or will affect my financial stability in the future. I don't regret a minute of that. Not even that, oh my God, here's an 11 grand bill from the tax man and I've spent it moments. I can genuinely hand on heart say that I would happily have lived in a caravan to have that time with them. Although at the time, sometimes, of course, it doesn't feel like that. So from that point of view, absolutely. I am now in the lucky position that my kids are a bit older. And so we're starting to think, okay, maybe we can up our game a little bit with work. So I'm reaching out in various directions at the moment to try and upgrade the work amounts that we're doing. And we're going to shift geographically from one part of the country to another so that we can change the house that we have in Devon, which is lovely, into hopefully a little small holding somewhere up in Scotland, which would be a bit of a dream for everyone in the family. But I don't really regret it. And I think if it doesn't pan out in the next couple of years, I can get a job. I haven't lost my skills. I can go and be a chef de cuisine or a head chef for somebody in an interesting and vibrant restaurant or hotel. And what have I lost? Nothing really. I've gained some experience. I've had some fantastic experiences. I've shared a lot of time with my family. And I've been over some financial bumps, but
that's the same if you're in. It's the same. Everybody's finance. It's certainly the same as a business kind of owner, entrepreneur. I mean, the tax bills are relentless. They just keep piling up. You've always spent the money.
I know.
Because you need the money, not because you spent it on yourself, but you just need it in the business. It's great when the quarterly VAT bill comes. And, you should have put the VAT aside. That's not your money. That's our money. You're just collecting it for us. And you're like, right, brilliant. Thank you very much. I do need to pay everybody and pay for all the stock.
Well, they need to. And I know that they're making moves to make this easier, but they need to be taking that in real time. If you pay for something via card over the machine at the restaurant and 20% of it's VAT or whatever the VAT rate is in restaurants these days, I don't 20%, know.
Yep.
That should just go straight off to the government. It should never hit your bank account. It should never be anything to do with you. And they're getting there, right? Real-time tax is coming.
I think they would love that, yeah. It's tricky, in seasonal businesses when, you're trying to... save VAT in the summer when you can, and then in the winter, you're just literally spending every penny that comes into the business on
because
staff.
you've got to pay people.
I'm sure they would love
keep
it
the doors
if it
open.
just got taken straight away. So the small holding idea is interesting then, and moving to Scotland. So you refer to yourself a little bit as an economic migrant, I think, do you? But there's different opportunities
I do.
in Scotland.
I don't think there's anything wrong in that. I mean, Scotland is a beautiful place. I'm enchanted by it. There's loads of opportunity up there to do some cool stuff. Devon is far more populated, okay? So in theory, this is a better place to live and work. But in a selfish way, Caroline and I and the kids, we don't live in a town. We live quite rurally, but we don't have a detached house with a few acres, of our own little bit, which is, for me, still the dreams. Probably why I ended up at River Cottage in the first place, is that ability to just sit in the middle of a little bit of land and, go, oh, look, that's where the vegetables are supposed to be growing, but they've failed, that sort of thing. I also love, one of my massive passions in life is mushrooms, right? I'm an absolute nutter for mushrooms. And because of that, Scotland, there's some great mushroom foraging around here in Devon. And after I've left, I'll happily share the locations for that with you. But I'm really looking forward to getting up to Scotland to get do more of that in a more fungus rich and diverse environment. So I'm looking forward to Scotland for all sorts of different reasons. And of course I will travel. I already travel all over the country. So in a way where I'm based doesn't really matter. But if Scotland will give us the dream of the little house with the little bit of land, then let's have that now, because in 10 years time we still might not be there in Devon. I mean, it's a huge amount of money to buy something like that in Devon, and the prices keep going up. So
yeah, exciting. I did a mushroom foraging podcast with John Winston. Do you know John Winston? Is he called the City Forager? He's based a little bit further east of here. But anyway, have a listen. It was brilliant. And what I really did, it literally opened my eyes to that sort of being present and being conscious in the forest. I love the forest. I go out and walk. We went in the New Forest and I walk my dog there regularly. But actually, when you really slow down and kind of get down on your hands and knees and you start to look, amazing what you see, almost meditative kind of trance-like focus, I suppose, on the forest floor and what goes on.
It's a definite. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about mindfulness, going foraging or fishing or hunting or shooting is going to bring you right into the moment. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. And mushrooms are incredible, right? We're only just beginning to understand fungus. Fungus have the ability to cure cancer. They have the ability to cure depression. They have the ability to treat addiction. They have the ability to enhance end-of-life care. They have the ability to prevent viruses. They have the ability to remediate environments that have been damaged by toxic waste. You can grow oyster mushrooms on wood shavings that have been soaked in crude oil, and what you have left over is some much less dangerous hydrocarbon non-present material that is organic matter and can be spread and used as a fertilizer, and edible mushrooms that aren't poisonous. It's amazing, isn't it? We are only beginning to understand the power of mushrooms, but as that understanding increases and people's awareness of them comes, as well as feeding a growing population with limited or finite resources, which is effectively a global issue, mushrooms are going to be a bigger part of that than people realise. And we can make plastic from mushroom mycelium that biodegrades. We can do all sorts of cool stuff with mushrooms. Fungi are the way forward.
Yeah, no, it blew my mind. I had no idea about the mycelium and all the stuff that they can do, and it literally blew my mind. People go and have a listen to that particular podcast. So moving to Scotland, sticking to the same sort of stuff, coming down, travelling, hoping to replicate some of what you do down here up there.
Yeah, of course.
Is there going to be a shed? Can you find a shed? You can just do it on your little...
It might have to be a bothy. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to Scotlandicize it in some way. It's interesting. We've just come back from a little trip to Scotland where I was trying to meet some people, because I think it's good to get involved with some of the hospitality folk up there before we get there, because that makes sense, right? Let's go and meet them. Let's offer to do some stuff with them. Let's hopefully work for them a bit, and then hopefully do bring some value to them with me. And actually, they all ask the same question: are you going to open your own place? And I really hate being asked that question, because the answer is always like Jekyll and Hyde. There's still this part of me that wants to be that, to do that, to just, and it's just going to be just me in my shed, and you're going to come and have lunch, and then that's it.
Yeah,
and there's nothing else.
You're given 25 covers.
Yeah, exactly.
It's my menu.
And then it'll be, why don't you open the evenings? Why don't you do this? Could you do this for us? But we don't really want that. Why don't you get a license? We need some staff. Let's do it. Stop
into my life.
Stop with the brain. So no, I don't. Yeah, there might be a shed. There might be a shed, but I don't think there's going to be a Tim Maddams restaurant.
No. Okay, well, congratulations for carving your niche and for winging it, as we all are fundamentally, and managing to eke a living. And it'd be good. I'll come up and see your small holding. Please make some sort of regenerative, happy, beautiful farm. That would be lovely.
We'll try and do that.
I might just come and be a neighbour. I think I can definitely see the appeal. I can just do the podcast via Skype around the world by then. So that'll be fine. If people want to follow your journey and potentially come on some of your courses or come to the shed, is it all in one place? Where should they go to find out about all this stuff?
You probably hit the website, I guess, as a good place to land, which is timmaddams.com. If you're interested in shooting or coming shooting with me, then that's timmaddamsfieldsports.com. We have two separate websites for that, which is interesting. And from there, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the usual sort of millions of places that you have to have a presence.
People can find you. Perfect. On the humansofhospitality.co.uk website, I will put up links to most of those that I can find. And we also put the show notes up. So people who, I can't imagine anybody would want to fast track through the conversation, and it's too late really by the time they've got to this point to find out they could have. But maybe for the next episode, you can go there and you can see the show notes and you can skip through to the bits that you want to listen to. But good luck. Thank you for sparing the time, Tim, and letting me into your house.
Absolute pleasure. Mark, thanks very much for coming to see me.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast, and remember that on the website humansofhospitality.co.uk every week we put on some show notes and some links through to the various websites or social media that are mentioned, and we also do a nice little breakdown of that week's conversations into specific topics, so you can jump through the podcast and just listen to some of the highlights if you wish. If you've not done so already, if you could leave us a review on iTunes or one of the other podcast players of your choice, that would be hugely appreciated. Thank you so much, and we'll be out with another episode next Monday.